How likely are more US banks crashes and shakeups? Quite a lot. The vulnerability of the US banking system in connection with the fall of Silicon Valley Bank has increased significantly, according to a new study published by the US National Bureau of Economic Research. As many as 190 banks in the US may find themselves in a state of collapse, which, among other things, as we'll see, would be the greatest for many cryptocurrencies, led by Bitcoin. According to aforementioned study, the current market value of the assets of the American banking system is a full $2 trillion lower than their book value. This is because individual banks hold assets, such as long-term government bonds or mortgage-backed securities, the price of which has fallen quite dramatically as a result of the significant rise in the interest rates across the economy. In their accounting, however, the price before this drop is still reported, as it is based on the assumption that the banks will hold the securities in question until maturity. However, this is not guaranteed, as the case of the aforementioned Silicon Valley Bank showed. The latter had to sell part of its securities at the market price, below the original book value, in order to have money to pay depositors. This triggered an avalanche of revaluations from accounting to market price. At the same time, it sent a signal to the public that he's in trouble when has to sell a property below the book price, apparently as an emergency, which only fueled the depositors' rate to the institution, so that it eventually went bankrupt. The depositor rate of Silicon Valley Bank was so massive because the bank had a relatively high proportion of uninsured deposits. For the same reason, this bank and its fall came first in line, but nowhere it is written that there cannot be more such crashes. The study by the National Bureau of Economic Research concludes that if individual banks in the US lose only half of their aggregate uninsured deposits, approximately 190 banks in the US are at risk of collapse. According to the data from an American central bank, the largest ever outflow of deposits from small banks occurred in the second week of March. At the same time, possible further falls and shocks of banks in the Euro-American circuit would very likely lead to further growth in the price of Bitcoin and with it many other crypto. The development of the price of Bitcoin shows a remarkably close connection with the development of the aggregate money supply of the world's most important economies. Specifically, the deviation of the current price of Bitcoin from its 10-month moving average, the yellow curve, hits its bottom 7 months before the turning point in the development of the year-on-year change in the aggregate money supply of the 13th largest world economy, the white curve. This is how Bitcoin capitulated last June, when losses on it reached the greatest extremes. But since the third quarter of last year, the world's most important central banks have been gradually loosening their previous drastic monetary policy tightening. For example, the Bank of England had to inject new liquidity into the financial system last fall in order to prevent the potential collapse of the British pension fund segment. The Japanese and Chinese central banks also joined. Currently, the American Central Bank had to reverse its monetary policy tightening in order to prevent the collapse of other banks after the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. It introduced new programs of favorable loans to banks and subsidies of their kind intended for them. These programs represent liquidity injections. Analysts of the American bank Citigroup therefore referred to the measures as a quantitative easing by another name. And analysts of the British bank Barclays believe that by increasing interbank liquidity, these programs will create pressure for a decrease in interest rates for bank loans to households and companies. In other words, new liquidity flows into the financial system, and the money supply grows again. The increase in the volume of the aggregate world money supply, as we know, shows a positive correlation with the development of the price of Bitcoin. Fundamentally, it causes the devaluation of a conventional money, which is greased to the mill of Bitcoin, as a key unmanipulated alternative to conventional money. With possible further shocks and bank failures, additional liquidity injections will be needed, which will therefore be just more grease to the mill for Bitcoin. Its price should therefore increase.